It is up. This is Captain Eon speaking. The very grateful, humbled, honored servant in chief of Essence Holdings International and its community of companies. For today's share, I wanted to first talk about the whole reason why God had no regard for Cain. In fact, in chapter 4, verses 5 to 6, it says he had no regard for him. And then it continues to go on, he wasn't doing well, so on and so forth. But as I've grown up in this way, and I've heard this said many times, many ways, but it's only when I really started, or when God started revealing himself to me, that I came to the conclusion of what I believe is the biblical answer, or the right answer for the question, why did God reject Cain and his sacrifice? Now, I held the belief for a while that it was because he offered up produce instead of the blood of an animal. Now, I have not, this is the second day of this new year, I didn't see anywhere where God told them to sacrifice animals. For me, that wasn't implemented yet. Even though it was his plan, he had not passed it down to man, saying, hey, this is redemption. From what I remember, the only thing that has transpired so far is that the paradise was broken and the curse was introduced. So, of course, I started saying, well, Lord, okay, what could it be? And I'm realizing that I am not supposed to lean to my understanding. From what I got from day one was knowledge is power. That has been said, and I agree that it's true. But what type of power? Because there's different powers. And it was the knowledge of good and evil. It was man's attainment of this knowledge of good and evil that ushered in the curse. Again, sharing my thoughts, my point of view, basically my mind, my heart, giving you a little insight into the inner workings of this servant of the Most High. So I continued to, and it wasn't until today, and that's why I believe it's important to get the full revelation. I was just thinking about a motto that says, or which I agree is bringing the whole gospel to the whole world, but I don't believe that is possible unless people are made disciples of the entire revelation. For me, this 66 book love story the best instructions before leaving earth in order to walk this life in good, orderly direction is the full gospel. It's the whole revelation, the complete understanding. And I have seen, and I'm just talking from personal experience, that in embarking upon this journey, in only 2 years, I've gained so much. Truly, I feel I've grown in ways that I could never dream of, that I'm being transformed into his likeness. And that's all because of getting into the whole story, the whole truth, the whole gospel, the entire instruction manual. I'm seeing that everything is connected. Everything is connected. Everything builds upon itself. There's nothing like him. Nothing like our God. And of course, his word is no exception. So, with that said, the conclusion I've come to, where he was not accepted, is from previous studies towards the in the New Testament. I believe it's Hebrews, where God is speaking to me, to us, to whoever will listen to what he's saying. There he's talking about faith. I believe that's where, without faith without works is dead. I'm please don't quote me, but I believe it's Hebrews. It's the faith chapter, faith portion of this discipleship course. And when it begins talking about naming the different people, I believe it's there when it actually speaks of, and if it's not there specifically, I should have maybe looked it up, but I'm not going to do all the work for you. If you want to find it, it's as simple as some keystrokes in Google. But it talks about, if I'm recalling correctly, which I believe I am, Cain offered his sacrifice and he didn't do it in faith. Because it does say that he gave him the best of the field. And going back to my personal belief and understanding, and verse 12 of chapter 4 really reiterates the goodness of God. Like, there's none like him. He's the only one that's good. Just sidetracking for a minute, is when God starts asking questions. And that's so interesting. God is asking questions and he knows everything. So that tells me a being that doesn't know everything, like us finite humans, why wouldn't we ask questions? In any case, he asked him the questions, I believe it was like 3 questions he asked him. Why you mad? I'm paraphrasing. Why is your countenance falling? Why you mad? Where's your brother? And what have you done? And it was in this instance where then he basically took wrath upon himself. But again, the goodness of God. He's the murderer. He's a murderer. He did evil. The ground was crying out. He shed innocent blood. But yet and still, God never let him starve. He didn't say you can't get food. He just said, when you labor, the ground's not going to give you its strength. I translate that to be, you're not going to get the choicest, the best, the first fruits. Or maybe you will get it, but you're not going to get a full crop, a big yield. My interpretation. he still fed him. The murderer, he also protected him, because he said, oh man, I'm a murderer now, I'm a convict, I'm gonna go out there, people's gonna see me, and and he said, no, nobody's gonna touch you. So I said, wow. In that moment, it was like, God, there's none like you. You are good. You are great. Look how Cain violated in a major way. And yet God still extends goodness, still extends kindness. And my personal opinion, that's why I find that I have to be very careful equating, when people talk about the prosperity gospel and all these things. I think that's dangerous, to equate getting things to the favor of God. Because God is so good, he gives to all freely, liberally, fully. That doesn't mean you have his favor necessarily. That just is a testament of his greatness and his goodness and his gloriousness. Hallelujah. There's none like him. For me, that's why there's only one that's good. Nobody else can claim that. Truthfully. So, I had digressed to that, saying that, oh man, I should have just, he gave him the I hope I'm getting back on the right track, but he gave him his fruits of his field. Oh yes, the goodness and the fairness of God, when talking about, because he gave his produce is why but that's what he was. He was a farmer. He was a man of the field. I don't believe this good God expects something from me that I can't do. Like, he doesn't expect me not being say a doctor to go perform brain surgery on people. If someone needs, and I believe his power is so great. Well, I don't think that's a good analogy, because I want to start getting into this, tapping into the healing power of the Lord. But along the lines, he's not going to expect a farmer to give him, livestock, and vice versa. I don't think he would have expected Abel, a farm, a herdsman, a shepherd, I guess the word was trying to kind of eluding me. But the person that has livestock, he's not expecting that person to bring him vegetables. So that's why I believe in his goodness, it wasn't because he wasn't acceptable. And he said before, you're not doing well. He disregarded him as being unacceptable simply because he's not doing well. And not doing well for me was not living in faith. Again, as the journey continues and you get the full revelation, the full understanding of these instructions, it is said later on, but because he lacked faith. So that's with all that said, that's what I was initially gonna talk about. But ultimately, that's not the main idea. As I was in we time and having good conversation, and all of a sudden it was impressed upon me the thought of bound by freedom. And really it started with the thought that, I don't follow like all these things and trends or whatever, but I believe I fall into Generation X. The reason I say this is because the thought was, and that's where the bound by freedom came, is that the generation after me, I guess it's Y and everything else, the thought came that this and they are the first completely free generation. And when I say that, I mean, I was thinking about, like, in the United States, slavery, segregation, racism, all that stuff. And as another side note, some years ago, when people were up in arms about this owner and he had racist remarks. First of all, the man was in his own house. He should have a right to his own opinion, especially in his own house. He shouldn't he Where he went wrong was he chose the wrong female because she put him out there. In any case, when everyone's up in arms about racism and stuff, I wasn't surprised. Martin Luther King was assassinated in the late 60s. Hello? You think all of a sudden when they said, okay, no more segregation, all these racist people were like, oh, okay, all right, that never happened. We're all kumbaya? In any case, I made that point to say my parents were born before the late 60s. So they were born under, restriction. They weren't slaves, they weren't out in fields, but they were restricted. Even then on television things, it wasn't really catered for minorities. Me growing up, it was still the mindset of you stick to your own kind. Meaning if whatever your nationality, whatever your race, you don't intermarry, you don't intermix, none of that. A restriction. This is why I say now there's really this generation, well, for lack of a better word or for the term, why I'm using everything after my generation is free because they don't have these hang-ups about, intermarrying. For example, in industry and business, you really had to go through like gatekeepers. They might still be out there, and I don't want to get on that right now because anyways, things were limited. You had limited ways of getting into certain industries to make a name for yourself, to be successful. And let me just say this. Anybody that's still, serving dope or, I'll put it right, poisoning people, bodily, pimping, poisoning the minds. Anybody doing these basic things, there's no excuse for that anymore in this day and age where there's freedom. Prior to this, again, in these generations, resources were very limited. Education, job opportunities, ways to get up out of poverty. It really was. You had to go off to school, and it was hard because the education systems in lower class communities weren't built for people to kind of get out of that. So you have sports or rapping, but then once again, you got into those arenas and they were still being restricted because you had to sign to big corporations and organizations that were still slaving people in such a way. However, now, that's not the case anymore. Someone can sit in their home. I'm sitting here now talking into a device that can broadcast me, and then I can put it on this thing called the internet, or the interweb, or whatever. But I can from my home broadcast now across the globe. So the excuses about that's why I say before, anybody still living a low life and doing those things, I have no sympathy anymore. Those excuses are no longer valid for me. And I'm talking to myself because the opportunity's there, generally. So, with all that said, with the main idea bound by freedom, with all of this freedom now, all of this opportunity, all of this knowledge, all of this so-called power that doesn't give the right to just do whatever. That's why also, I'm going to be honest, and this is what this is about, is I have a problem with, the law and the government and those that are supposed to uphold and things, biggest lawbreakers, because this power, this, position has led to a lot of abuse and a lot of, and most of the time, the person who's abusing this power is doing it so-called in the name of justice. No, I have to uphold justice. And I don't believe in breaking the law to uphold the law. That doesn't make any sense. Two wrongs can't make a right. A little back to the biblical thing. I don't see any, there was no police in the way God set up his system. You did have a judge where basically people brought their, because there would be disagreements and things, people brought their cases before people and a decision was made. And the reason, again, I ultimately believe this is because, and I've seen it on different scales, I believe that was the initial thought. Don't get me wrong, I don't know these things, but like the Black Power movements and things, I believe that's what it was. They were policing themselves. I believe it's out in Cali on the West Coast. I heard they had this thing, I don't know if it's still going around, probably some years ago, what they called the Guardian Angels. It was basically, I guess, in terms over here, crime watch, things like that. People police themselves. People look out for each other. People, in any case, the freedom, bound by freedom. Being free is not a license to just do whatever. There was two parts here, and this comes to it. It talks about where, and it's the two sides, bound by freedom. And I think there's going to be two sides, because you have the Cain, you have the Abel, you have the good, you have the bad, you have the blessed, you have the curse. God made these two parts, which everything really leads to the one. But when it start talking about the generations, and the main ideas really coming from chapter 5, verses 21 to 29, I started realizing as it was going in the genealogy of Adam, it was almost the same pattern of names. For a minute I got confused where they threw Cain's lineage in there a minute. So I had to go back up, and I think into 4 and check the end of that. But really, because, Cain had Enoch with CH on the end, and his lineage after that. It was so interesting because Cain's great grandson, Lamech, actually continued the murderous heritage. Now, with him, he told his wives it was in self-defense, but still, Cain, began the lineage of murderers. I would say, the dark side, the lower side, the low lives. But God is not going to go without. And that's why in verses 21 to 29, Seth's generation, and it was when Seth had a child named Enosh, S.H. And it was at the end of chapter 4, verses 26, where it says, when Enosh came, through him, people started calling on the name of the Lord again. How good is God? Again, he allows evil. He says, you go first. I'm a perfect gentleman. Go ahead, go right ahead. He trumps, he capitalizes everything. And that's what makes it even greater, because it's okay, hit me with your best shot. Do your worst. Oh, that's all you got? And he says, boom. And just glorifies everything. Oh, God. In any case, so you had Enosh, which it says, and of course, going back to 1, he was in Adam's likeness. Adam was in the likeness of God. So here comes the lineage. But the names in verse 21 to 29, I started seeing again. There was Enoch. But this is Seth's Enoch. This is, say, the second man. Came, and after a good 365, he was taken away. But it was through this Enoch and through his Lamech that Noah came. And I found that very, very interesting. Where God says, okay, messed up this way, I'll take the same thing, put my glory on it. It's kind of also with Ishmael and Isaac. I don't want to get too far ahead, but again, line upon line, it all fits. In any case, and this is a whole nother thing for itself. I forget what you call the angels, the angelic beings that came down and began having sex with women. That's a whole thing in itself, you know. But from this union came men of renown. And I began thinking about this, saying, men of renown. That sounds like something that, you know, you want to be. And then again, going to the two sides. So what you would call on the low side, you have the men of renown. I looked that up, and renown means the condition of being known or talked about by many people, i.e. fame. And it was like, okay, if you're well renowned, you're well known, you're well liked, you're probably famous, you got a lot of followers, you got a big following, people trying to be like you, you know, people hanging off your every word. Renown. Could today, when we're seeing all of these, could celebrity culture be the product of these renowned beings prior? Just a thought. I did reference that to, or compare it now, because if you have the renowned on one side, then what are you going to have on the other side? Talking about Enoch, he pleased God so much, God just took him away. Like, God just kidnapped him. No fanfare, no big send-off, no celebration. You would think you're going to heaven and go with God, the angels would come down and then he just gone. You know, a little bit forward, Moses, not even the devil knows where his bones are. I started, when I saw that, then looking for comparison, I thought of Gideon. And I thought of, in Judges chapter 6 verse 12, where he was referred to as a mighty man of valor. I believe that's after he was hiding or something. So he went to like the coward. God went to the coward and said, "You're a man of valor." I looked what valor is, and the definition I found is great courage in the face of danger. Can't even read my own handwriting. Especially in battle. So, with this idea of bound by freedom, I realized that the well-renowned, and we hear it all the time, you know, the almighty dollar. Lord forgive me for putting that on there. Money is power. Let's put it that way. I'm sorry. Money is power. Since we're talking about freedom, money gives you a freedom to kind of live however and do whatever. Whether it's getting whatever you want, whether it's escaping judgment for crimes, whatever it is. If you're well renowned enough, you have a certain level of freedom to kind of live and do however you want. Again, I'm realizing that that's not true freedom. For me, the true measure of freedom is being bound by it. For example, if you have all the power and all the right and all the authority, yet you live with integrity, I had the thought and then I didn't know how to phrase it. But you live bound by honor, bound by loyalty, bound by integrity. See that word? They're bound by these things that says, no matter whether or not I can do this, no matter whether or not I can get away with it, no matter, I'm bound by it. And that's what I'm starting to realize in this walk with God, when the disciples and these our elder brothers, our upperclassmen, the first ones that came through Jesus Christ University and walked this way, how they were saying, I'm a bondservant of Christ, I'm bound by him, I'm a slave for him. I'm starting to realize that doesn't mean that, because they even said, just because God's forgiving, just because he's merciful, just because he's good, doesn't mean to abuse that power. God forbid that you would continue willfully doing something simply because you can. Bound by freedom. But God says you're free. Whoever the Son sets free. If you're free by the blood of Jesus, you're free indeed. But there is something that I'm bound by him. It's like when I want to do things that I want to do, I begin to think about him, and not all the time, not perfectly, but how it must make him feel. And I'm bound by that to say, I gotta be loyal to you as much as possible. I gotta persevere. I gotta continue dosing because I'm bound by you. I owe you. It's like the leper. He didn't have to come back. The other 9 didn't, and I don't think they were not healed. They were healed. But he realized the freedom that he had been given. Again, putting myself in his shoes, the freedom that comes with knowing Jesus Christ truly, like truly for yourself, and how it's like I have to. That's the binding. I have to. Because in the other way, when you're well renowned, it seems like you don't have to do anything. and you're free to do whatever. But that's not a real freedom, because ultimately you're bound by chains of sin and evil, darkness. But the thing about those chains is the rope is very loose. It gives you a lot of rope to hang yourself. And it has to be a lot of rope, because the hanging is going to be in eternal darkness. And I'm realizing that being bound, not uptight, but being constrained, to use these terminologies that I'm learning, is freedom. There's something glorious in that. Hallelujah. The ultimate example is when God was actually going through what he designed to go through, so I could, and whoever will, could enjoy this freedom. He made mention that, hey, I could end all this right now. I could stop all of this from happening. I could call heaven down. I'm sorry for that. I felt like the quote unquote preaching thing started happening. But he could call heaven down. And yet he constrained himself. He had the freedom to do so. And yet he didn't. And because of binding himself, salvation came. So he's showing me that's where the real power lies. And this is something that is not to be ashamed of, to be a bondservant of Christ. And I'm realizing now, or for me, putting myself in the shoes of our brethren who wrote letters to the rest of the saints, introducing themselves as a bondservant. I get that. When you hear Captain Eon and Servant in Chief, that comes from that. Is being in service, because part of being bound to serve, bound to walk, bound to give. In closing, I kind of ended where I started today, and I started by referring to when God he disregarded Cain. He had no regard for the things that, I guess, his lack of faith, which was unacceptable to him. And just how it started, chapter 6, verses 22, it ends off by talking about Noah and the favor that he had with God. How God came to him and spoke to him. God said everywhere everything was evil. And I think this all started with those well-renowned, because after that everything was sideways. Everybody was doing everything. And in any case, chapter 6 verse 22 says that Noah did all that God commanded of him. And I believe that's the doing his commandments. When he asked our brother Peter, do you love me? There he goes asking questions he knows the answer to. Peter was like, Lord, you know. Come on, man, why are you playing? You know. He said, well, do this. Do this. For me, all that God commands, I'm incapable of doing it. I try. I fail. And I'm glad his grace and mercy. But one thing I try to do is adhere to to the greatest of all commandments. And referring again to Peter, the greatest of all the commandments. First, know that he is one. Know that he is the only. Hallelujah. He is the source of all. And when you begin to know, as I begin to grow in the knowledge of him, it makes me want to love him. It makes, and how do I do that? Keeping his commandments. I want to keep myself bound. When a man loves a woman, that's a song. When a man, I won't even hurt your ears like that. But when a man loves his bride, and they become one, they bind themselves saying, it's just you and me. I don't look at another woman like I look at you. I don't do things for others like I do for you. And God bound himself to his church. And he says, I had to stop myself because I caught myself saying, and he says, and this is just my interpretation, as he speaks to me, I speak out loud, that he bounds him, when he binds himself to that, his favor is there, his way of escape, his instruction. And we talk, going back to the generation of freedom, if we can live in this world of so much quote unquote freedom, and as his bride remains spotless, bound, too faithful to our bridegroom, we will escape. To a place where his name will be called, will be praised, will ring out forever and ever and ever. Caption this.